My own scholarly efforts have been to square Bernhard's overlapping geometries and directional vectors with his pedagogical intervention, linking him to his contemporaries and to those intellectual father figures whom he cites. The former group includes architects such as Friedrich Achleitner, Hans Hollein, Walter Pichler, Raimund Abraham, and the latter group includes forebears such as Novalis, Musil, and Nietzsche. In his prose works in particular, Bernhard disparages the state of humanist education because its deterioration has gone hand in hand with the decline of the public sphere and the increasing dominance of science, what Bernhard calls the Wissenschaftswelt in a prize lecture that he gives in 1965, with its chimerical goal of total quantifiability. The open space of discussion that guarantees a democratic society is closed with the turn away from what Bernhard construes to be teaching in its true form, a discursive education that takes place in radically other spaces. In my book, I position Bernhard's novels in regard to the interventions in higher education and the discourse around architecture that begins around 1960 in the German-speaking world. In How We Learn Where We Live, I trace an arch between Bernhard's seminal early work, his early novella Ambras from 1964, through Gargoyles, Verstörung from 1967, and Correction, 1975, Korrektur, to his last novel, Alte Meister, Old Masters from 1985. Linking these novels to the sites in which they occur, the spaces accreted histories, and the fantastic spaces they elicit in the protagonists' imaginations. So for one, it's the Castle Ambras in Tyrol with its extraordinary cabinet of curiosities from the mid-16th century, which finds its way into Ambras. The Wittgenstein House in Vienna, built in the late 20s, which is dealt with in his novel Korrektur. The building's almost torn down in the early 1970s and barely saved from demolition before Bernhard uses Wittgenstein as one of his characters. And the Art History Museum in Vienna, part of the Gründerzeit, the Ringstraßenbauten of the late 19th and early 21st century, with its incredible Habsburg collection of art. And I deal briefly also with the graphic novel of Old Masters by Nikolaus Mahler, which is really a brilliant reading of Thomas Bernhard's novel from 1985. So for those of you familiar with Bernhard's writings, you can well imagine that his educational program is littered with false starts, logical traps, broken promises, intellectual errantry, emotional dead-end streets, and rational errors. It is not for naught that Bernhard has been decried as a dark writer of societal malfeasance and general decline. So while I demonstrate the eventual emergence of a coherent program of Bildung in his works and register certain successes on the part of his protagonists in developing a model of dialogic education, I also spend a great deal of time showing the errantry in which his protagonists engage as they traverse treacherous ground and fight their way upwards in hermetic buildings thought to open new intellectual vistas to them. In focusing on one Bernhard essay entitled Ebene, or Plane, and the novel Gargoyles this evening, I'd like to remain with Bernhard's early work, where the false starts and the logical entrapment is particularly pronounced, closing my talk with a brief foray into the productive possibilities of such entrapment and mistaken heights.